Maida Withers is a choreographer, performer, activist, professor at George Washington University, Washington, D.C. Born in Kanab, Utah. She started her dancing career at the end of 60s under the influence of postmodern dance movement. Studied and worked together with such famous artists as Anna Halprin, John Cage, Merce Cunningham, Eric Hawkins, Martha Graham, Alvin Nicolai, and Mary Wigman. Since 1965 teaches dance in George Washington University. Together with her Maida Withers Dance Construction Company, created more than 150 performances collaborating with festivals and artists from all over the world. Since 1987, one of the main themes of her work was the study of Earth and natural phenomena. In 1995, founded the Festival of Improvisation in Washington, D.C. that existed for 14 years. Also, Maida is a director and an author of a few documentaries and video dances. In 1978, Maida became a co-author of the 10-episode documentary movie series Dance, Dance, Dance on NBC. Nowadays, Maida Withers continues to teach in the university and creates new works. One of her performances is created together with 16 Ukrainian dancers in Kyiv in 2018 for a 60th anniversary celebration of the National Actors Center.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anton Ovchinnikov, and today we start our first interview with dance artists from all over the world. Today we have our first guest from Washington, D.C., United States. It's Maida Withers, dancer, performer, choreographer, and professor of George Washington University. And I'm happy to introduce Maida. Hi, Maida. Good afternoon.
Hi, Anton. Thank you so much for including me. And good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
And good evening to the Ukrainian audience. Now it's 7 p.m. in Ukraine. And now I have my first question to you. As far as I know, you were born in a big family with 8 brothers and sisters. How this happened that you started to be interested in dance?
Well, I was the baby, and so you have lots of privileges. Being the youngest of 8, you're sort of a free spirit. No one notices when you're not about. So I lived a very open childhood in a very spectacular and idyllic place. The name of that little town is Kanab. And that's a Native American name. And though there were no Native Americans there, that indigenous population was gone but present. And it was a place that has influenced my entire life. And I believe a lot of my artwork is actually deeply rooted in the freedom that I had as a child to roam. I climbed to Indian dance hall when I was 5. With rocks being thrown by my brothers saying, "Go away, little sister, go away." So I'd like to share with you, if I could, a very brief video of that place so that we get some idea of the magnitude of the terrain. So
yes, please, let's see it.
Yeah. This is called Tuk. It's part of a wonderful full video. And this was during a residency on the Earth for a period of 6 weeks. So that was part of a project that actually was premiered in a world premiere at Lincoln Center out of doors for Great Dance in the Bandshell. And there were moving buttes, but a film was actually projected on the moving buttes. And the music that you're hearing is actually Brent Michael David's, and he's quite a spectacular Mohican Nation, and that's a glass flute that he was playing that he built himself. I just got a note from him this morning saying, "Good luck, Maida." So thank you, Brent. Anyway, back to my childhood. I don't know what's important to learn except that I was in this small community, and everyone loved to dance. Everybody loved to sing. We had a lot of theater, but it was basically community way to come together. And so that was important to me, and I was just part of life. It was part of life. And there was not that much access in Utah, in the state of Utah, for me living in the hinterlands. So basically, I went to Saturday to study dance. And on Saturday, Levon Turner, who I greatly admired, taught 15 minutes of tap, 15 minutes of jazz, 15 minutes of ballet, and 15 minutes of acrobatics.
Oh, that's a whole hour.
It was it. You got them all. You got everything. And then I started teaching for her when I was 13, and I taught 4 and 5-year-olds. So she was very important and inclusive person. And so as far as moving on to going to college, dance is very strong in Utah. It's very part of the culture there, a very positive attitude toward dance and dancers. So I did an undergraduate degree at Brigham Young University in dance and in theater. And okay. I did my master's degree then at the University of Utah in dance. And both of those were very fine programs. And because I had done so much teaching, I was asked to start teaching at BYU when I was a junior. So I was teaching beginning dance when I was 20 years old at the university. So teaching has always been an important part of my work, for sure. But the most important thing probably to tell about my background was I was the generation that crossed over. The modern dance had finally come into existence with Martha Graham and Jose Limon and Alwyn Nicolai, Eric Hawkins. Those were people that I studied with in summer workshops, and sometimes a little more, like with Eric Hawkins, more long-term involvement. But then I also moved to the next generation, which was Merce Cunningham, John Cage. I had them at the American Dance Festival for the summer in Connecticut. That was a very powerful influence. And Jose Limon was there as well, and so was Martha Graham, though I had met them in other situations. So that was my schooling was actually in modern dance.
And what was the most attractive for you in this in modern dance? Because I'm sure that the dances that you were studying when you were a child, it was absolutely different dances. And then these pioneers of postmodern dance, they were quite revolutionary in their approaches to dance. What was the most attractive for you?
Well, actually, I remember having an argument with my brother Val, who's a professor at UCLA now, about expressionism. And because I liked expression, I liked dramatic expression, and I liked connecting with the audience. And so I was very attracted to that, but I didn't like the techniques. I wasn't that much interested in how they were teaching you to move and train your body. It just was too stylistic for me. Graham was too stylistic, and Nicolai much more open and multimedia, and that was a terrific influence for that. Eric Hawkins was a very vain person, but beautiful connection to the human being. And his Lucia, the woman, his partner and his musician, I learned a lot from her about having live music and about having music and dance were equal companions, but they were all both present at the same time, the musicians and the dancers were present, not just heard and seen. So
Yeah.
I learned a lot from those modern dance people. In terms of Cunningham, I learned that technique. I was just not quite the right body for that. I had the length and I had the I like the intricacy of changing directions and small gestures of the body and the abstract relationship, the structures of bringing three people together and then piece by piece deconstructing that to leave only one person present. So basically, the transition there was, as you know, was Merce Cunningham for
Yeah.
most of us. But I also had the privilege when I was 18 to study for some time with Anna Halpern in San Francisco. And she invited me to go there for the first summer dance workshop. And actually, my colleagues, postmodern colleagues, Yvonne Rainer, many of them were there. And that's where I met some of them. And
Yeah.
her ideas, I stage managed her last formal stage production on a stage in San Francisco in a park. And so I disagreed with her somewhat on her ideas about bringing people together for emotional exchanges, which is a big project of hers for a while. But basically, I had to carve my own path. When
Yeah.
I started making choreography, I wasn't the right body, I wasn't the right mind to be a dancer for someone else, really. And
Hmm.
so I had the great privilege of when I came to Washington, D.C., I left Utah and came to Washington, D.C. I taught at Purdue University, then came to Washington. And most everyone here, there were 4 postmodern dancers here. And I liked them. We were good friends. And I just was not, I needed to make my own work. And the motivation actually was that I wanted to dance.
Yeah.
I was a
And
dancer and I
yeah.
wanted to dance. And so I needed to
And
make a company. And
you
so I
said
did. I made a company in 1975.
you said, Maida, that you also met Yvonne Reiner there, and she was the person who made these revolutionary steps, who wrote this famous
Yeah.
No Manifest, and she was mostly about how not being emotional, how not being connected to the audience, how not being representative in dance. So what did you think about this way that Yvonne Rainer chose?
Well, I think she wasn't alone. She wrote the manifesto, but I did about 15 years of summer workshops to bring all my postmodern friends from New York to Washington. And Yvonne was among them. She was maybe the third person that I brought. But I think that we were already disaffected with these ideas. We were moving on to a new generation. We'd moved through the Vietnam War. We'd moved through a change of life. Actually, Elvis Presley brought about a lot of the change. And we were moving forward culturally. And I don't think I even knew about her manifesto until many years later. But
Hmm.
Trisha Brown, I would say I see myself more related to Trisha Brown
Yeah,
uh, as a friend, also more as a friend. I respect them very much, and I consider them colleagues.
yeah,
And
and
so I think, as we describe my life, I think that all of that will become very clear. So anyway, the end of my training was to establish a master's degree program at George Washington University. And after that happened, I was able to invite 6 of them to form a company with me. And they were all out doing their own work. And you know, when you start a program, you get the best in the world come to it
yeah,
because there were
that's true.
not other programs. So the John Bailey and Brooke Andrews and brilliant people came to that program because it was one of the few. And so we formed the first dance construction company. And the title comes from, we were constructing works in the museums. Not even, we weren't in the museums to begin with, they wouldn't let us in. But we were on the street, we were on the buildings, we were any place and every place that we could be. And it was a collective initially called the Dance Collective. And it became the dance construction because we were constructing works of all
Yeah,
different kinds.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, and I have a question, Maida. You in 1965, you started teaching at the university, George Washington University. How would you describe the students, or the ideas they come with? Because I'm sure they are different from the students you have now. It was like 50, 60 years ago. And what is the difference really between the students in 60s, 70s and students now?
Well, I think maybe a basic thing was they were always very smart. Those early students were so smart, and there was so little opportunity. They were inventing something for themselves. They were trying to invent a new vision for themselves. So, but I think people maybe misunderstand that the dancing then was very good. I think that those original dancers of the company, I don't think I've ever had any dancers better, because they were select. They were from all over the United States, and they were select. So I think now so much more is taken for granted. I was watching yesterday on the video, and suddenly this woman, young woman, maybe 18, was doing all of these moves that we thought invented by the postmodern movement, but she was doing them like a gymnast. She was athletic. She was doing all the knee falls and all of the splits in the air and all of these amazing moves that were claimed by postmodern dance, that are evolution of language. And Eric Hawkins, I think, was very impactful on the evolution of language through his work. And that a lot of that became actually somatic, tied to somatic. That idea of investigating the body in a new, more depthful way. And I think that was a major influence on the postmodern movement, a different definition of moving and the human body, the relationship to the mind and so forth. So anyway, postmodern sort of came into existence, and we were called a revolution. And I believe my revolution never stopped, but I'm not sure.
Yes, in dance, I think it's never stopped, and probably in societies also. And
I think so.
my next question is, I know that you were engaged and you created some project about the ecology, and you were one of the person who started being engaged in the environmental movement, the performances which were aimed to protect nature. It was in 80s, 90s. Can you tell some words about that?
The first work, actually, the reason I showed you the clip from southern Utah was that my father and a lot of his associates were very conscious of the earth. And there was a sort of caretaker view of the earth, rather than exploiting the earth and making the earth be the resource for your economic wealth and so forth. And so I believe that philosophically in my home, I was taught to value all the resources of the planet and to see it in context with something beyond us as humans to use it up. But in any event, I did very early start to see the earth as a source for my work. And it came about in an odd way. A friend of mine, Beth Burkhart, went there and said, "Oh, I'm so astonished when I go to where you lived." Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, well, why is Beth Burkhart going there? And why haven't I gone there again? But my biggest connection with the environment was with the the United Nations Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. And I was invited to be part of 100 people to attend that conference. And the United States refused to attend the United Nations Earth Summit. So we paraded, one of my great moments there, we were dancing on the stage on the beach, and I did my dance as Transformation for the Earth called Rolling Thunder. And we used large tubes of, they were sculptures actually of an artist friend of mine, Hilda Thorpe. She let me use materials out of her attic. She's the 50s one of the great 50s, the woman of the 1950s artists in America. So we had these tubes and we played them as drums. We carried them, we floated them, but it was the earth itself is warning us. Something is happening, pay attention. So that was Rolling Thunder. But also we did on the mountain there, we did improvisations in the mountain, in the trees. Beautiful people like Gloria McLean and her husband Ken Haritsuka was there carving a stone rock in the stone garden. We made a work in the stone garden where dancers moved at sunset in the dusk, moved as rock, one block down the earth garden there in the Museum of Modern Art in there. And eventually they came to standing, but it is, what is the separation between the body and the rock? Are you the rock, or is the rock you? What is your relationship? Is in terms of the planet, what is our relationship to nature? So I have many amazing, I did a series of work called Farewell, and there's Farewell Tipping Point. In Africa, it was about desertification, but it was also about change because they were having a revolution while I was there. And they were back throwing stones and arrows. And so 9 Maasai dancers, 3 women and 6 men, performed the Farewell, and their understanding of nature and their understanding of its relationship to their future. So that dance had 8 sections. The final section was Farewell to the End of the World, or Dancing Your Way to Paradise. So we could choose to go to paradise and that seems to be the choice we're making. But anyway, no, I have deeply rooted, people referred to me as Mother Earth, and I said, no, I'm not that. I'm too wild for that. I'm more like a bird. But anyway, thank you for asking about the environment. I've wept over it because I've despaired. I was more optimistic in 1990 than I am today.
And do you really think that dance or performing arts can really make these changes, how people think about the earth, about the environment, that the artists, performing artists actually can help to save the earth now? What do you think?
I believe that we can do the best we can. And I'm not sure, what we can do is change ourselves. The dancers can change ourselves, and we can change our families, and we can change our friends. And I think that there is a spiritual capacity in performing and in living life where we have influence. If we are devoted and dedicated in our deepest spiritual selves to something, I do believe that it can impact on our planet and on the universe, perhaps. Some of my works about the environment are not like that. Like the work that I did with NASA about the dance of the aurora, fire in the sky. I didn't know that aurora came from the sun. So once I got into the science of that, I thought, oh, well, this is this work is going to take me 3 years. This is a big project. And so in learning about that, the science actually is such a supporter, I think, of environment. And as we connect more to science, we actually are connecting, I think, to the environment. And whether or not we can listen to science. But in that work, it was a beautiful work. It was abstract. We had Tanya Frog, a brilliant computer artist and architect from Sao Paulo, created a capacity for me to, with the wireless mouse, manipulate the sun and all of the energy being thrown into the universe that ends up as an aurora. We manipulated it with a wireless mouse. So in that instance, it was entertainment, and it was science, and it was beauty, and it wasn't a message about the environment, except it is the environment. Yeah. It is the environment. And so I'd say a lot of my work embodies that passion, without a message, so to speak, that you're talking about.
Yeah, can we see some fragments from that work
Yeah,
on the
let's see
video?
Dance of the Auroras. Yes. Actually, this is a 4-part work, and it starts with from the sun, and then it brings the magnetic field around the planet, and then it sees the Earth from the ship, the airplane that is traveling around the planet, and
Yeah.
the last view as is the aurora. So what you're seeing here, maybe it hasn't come up yet. There, I think maybe it's sharing now.
Yeah, that's it.
This is part 2. Uh, this is the, actually, I believe this is from the spaceship. This is what the spaceship, I mean, the airplane sees. So this is part 2. This is Ivana from Poland. This is Sasha from Russia.
That's
And
Ivona Olszewska, yes? She's a very
yes,
famous
it's a
choreographer in Poland.
magnificent dancer from Poland. And
Yeah,
Sasha
yeah.
was the first modern dance company in Russia. And he's still dancing, has a company, and so is Ivana. And you can see these are scientific images gathered by NASA. And this is the opening section, which is Joseph Mills managing and manipulating. He's holding the wireless mouse. The backdrop is like your screen, your monitor on your video monitor, your computer monitor. And he is manipulating all the movement of that. You can see the mouse in his hand. And this was an astonishing idea of Tanya. And I have the mouse, and I'm going to manipulate, but I'm quite a wild dancer sometimes. And so I kept knocking my hand kept going off the screen, and Tanya was in the wings on the computer present as usual, getting the images back on the screen again. But that's the mouse. We had to get the wireless mouse from Africa because nobody was using the wireless mouse in America at the time. This was pre-wireless mouse. So you can see my, anyway, this is another section. This is Joseph Mills and Adrian Clancy. Adrian has a company. Joseph was a dancer with Eric Hawkins. These are some of the animations. This is being manipulated by me, by the way, from the wings, because these two dancers couldn't do this and manipulate that. Imagine dancing with Maida and having to cope with all of the multimedia aspects of this. It's not for every dancer, for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
And all of my works, thank God, are not multimedia and are not interactive multimedia, as you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And talking about your students, Maida, do you think that now students are really interested to create works about nature, to raise these social questions in their works, or they are more interested in some kind of entertainment in dance?
I guess what they aspire to is something for the future. For the most part, in the program that I have created, the goal for the student is to be a creative artist. So they start out with improvisation, they go to trends in performance art, composition, choreography, but basically they're young. And so just to learn to create a dance, that's a challenge of its own. Some choose to do, but I encourage them to honestly make dances about their own life.
Yeah.
Because their own lives they know about, and they understand deeply sorrow, or they understand the fracturing of a relationship between, let's say, a father and a mother. Or so I promote mostly for them to make work about what they know the most about. And if they know the most about their own life, and if it's not too flamboyant or too personal, I think that's the way to go. But yes, some students, very much so, like a wonderful student 2 years ago took the GoPro and wore it on the wrist and did a whole thing about how the dancer shows up on an intimate level on the screen with a GoPro. And so she was ready and anxious to go beyond just her body or her experience. And I would say Linda Ryan is a good example of the best,
Yeah.
but mostly my goal for them is for them to learn how to make dance. And so they need to make dances they know something about.
Yeah, and do students in the dance and theater department, do they study technologies, how to use technologies when they make performances, how to use it in performing arts?
It's difficult. It's difficult to teach structure, which is very strong, important to me. You understand structure. You can always fall back on structure. Content is related to structure. You can always figure out how the structure will support your concept. But I think it's a lot. However, they're way ahead of me in terms of the internet and all the platforms there. And if sometime we want to talk about the future of education based on the COVID-19, we are definitely all being thrown onto the platforms of the computer. And they are already there and they know all about that. So my goal for this year in teaching is actually to have them live online and figure out how to use Zoom and WebEx and other platforms to actually online create work that is then to be performed and presented online. And so because I've done so much work with technology, my guest artist this year will probably be filmmaker, somebody that works online. And I hope it'll be Robin Bell, who does large projections, political projections on public buildings like the White House and Trump Tower and other places. So I'm interested in, they know a lot more perhaps than most of us as professors, though I know quite a bit. But your question is the future. And about the future, I would say we do not know after COVID what is the evolution of art. What is the evolution of life? We are all praying for change. So we have a moment now where change is supposed to happen, I think. Whether or not my work can move forward with it, I like change, so I'm hopeful. But we're in a new day.
Yeah, but I have a question. Do you consider yourself as an activist?
As a what?
Activist. Yeah.
Oh, I think that, well, I've been an activist in so many causes. and mostly they will show up in dance. For example, my generation were the feminists. And so I worked for 5 years for the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, dancing on stairs of buildings and interviewing on television and other things. But I also made some really good work. And one of them is called Woman C. And it was about my determination to depart trying to get equality in the American Constitution in the Equal Rights Amendment, because it was not going to happen. And I either needed to go to law school or I needed to make a work about it. So I made a work called Woman C. And in it, I do a wonderful solo, which is in silence. And I do all these vulgar gestures like touching my breasts and putting my hands between my thighs and giving the audience the finger and other things that were sort of humorous ways of being a feminist. But my approach to those kind of issues are like the approach to the environment. I make work about what I know from my own personal experience and what works are possible based on the dancers and based on the collaborators. And quite often that is with international opportunity. I've been in 38 countries and I like the influence of others on my work. I'm open to having the collaborators guide me into what is possible. I mean, a great teacher, John Driscoll and Steve Helmy, composers for me for 30 years, have taught me, I think, more than I can even imagine. But yes, I'm an activist for dance
That's
too.
cool. And from your own experience, what would you say the young modern choreographers should know about the profession of the choreographer? How they should build their professional careers?
Well, I think that I know my way, and I know the traditional way, like studying a ballet technique or studying a folk history or studying movements, what's even somatic, that people train in a way to move, that they can then create work. And with the postmodernists, we were sort of kicking out, trying to kick out what we'd learned to invent something. Where's a new place to dance, how to use the body differently, how to engage with multimedia arts, and how to dance in places that are not typical, etc. So I would say for a choreographer, I guess I would have some suggestions. And I think that mostly dance and learn about your own body as much as you can. Then I would say experience life as fully as you can, because that's where your ideas will come from. And that means showing up. You show up someplace, you hear a lecture, you have an exchange with a friend. So you experience life as fully as possible, because that gives you something to dance about. I would say as much as you can, perform, which is my way of doing it. Know about performing to begin with. And then surround yourself with people greater than yourself. And if you serve them well, dancers and collaborators, they will serve you well too. So I would say choreography, it's not for everyone. And if you're young and you start out, it'll take some time, but along the way, it's great fun, it's great work, it's failure, it's success, it's fear. Who will come? Who won't come? Can I sustain an audience? Will anyone care? It takes time, and you see that how that emerges. Now we have some new ideas, like the 18-year-old on TikTok. She's making her own dances in her living room and getting how many millions of followers. So I think our sort of maybe academic ways of thinking of choreography. One thing I would like to say about that, Anton, and that is one of the changes that happened with us as postmodernists. We didn't like the idea that someone choreographed and we imitated them. We needed to look like them in order to be on stage. And that was such a revolting idea to me, that I needed to look like somebody else or feel like somebody else or move like somebody. And I appreciate that skill. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of time, and that dancer becomes so incredible. And then they can perform so magnificently. But in a way, a postmodernist redefined choreography. It was the visionary like myself had a concept, an idea, and it was trying to be explored. And dancers were part of improvising. They were part of making duets. They were part of making the work come into existence. They were true collaborators. Sometimes we think of dance in collaboration with musicians or in collaboration with myself, filmmakers or computer artists or poets. But the first level of collaboration is with the dancers. And they're the heroes. They're called Maida Withers Dance Construction Company, often not reviewed or called by name. And,
called by name.
Okay, and I have a question about the young generation of established choreographers. Who do you think is the most important choreographers for the development of contemporary dance in the United States. Who do you think do really political works about social issues and things like that?
Well, I follow a rather, maybe it's not mainstream crowd. Jen Nugent, for example, she was one of my guest artists on the summer dance at GW. I bring a guest artist in twice a year, and she came from Florida. She was 20, I think 19 or 20 at the time. And Jen Nugent is a spectacular dancer. She's danced with Mark Morris, I believe, and Bill T. Jones, but she makes her own work and is an incredible performer. I think she has the ability to do her own work. I'm not sure. She's had such an extreme career by now, traveling all over the world with the great choreographers. I'm not sure whether she needs to make dances. I'm not sure. But I like people like Miguel Gutierrez, who's basically a performance artist, and he basically is a big proponent of the queer arts and festivals like that. And so he's definitely not mainstream, or maybe it is mainstream. Maybe
in some way,
yeah, have arrived at issues, the LGBT issues, the racism issues. Those are going to dominate the field of dance, I believe. I believe that they are going to be front and center, and I believe so. But to answer your question, my largest influence that I can acknowledge and relate to is John Cage.
Okay.
And I met him when I was at American College Dance Festival. I think I was 20. And he did a performance in which he sat at a desk with a glass of water. And he had 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. He had, I think, 60 or 90 of them. And he read from each page something from his life, unrelated to the next page, unrelated to the next page. And he would watch his watch, and at 1 minute, he moved the page. And I'm sitting there in my innocence thinking, what is this? This is dance, right? This is what is happening here. And who am I? And how do I connect to this? This is smart. This allows me a lot of imagination. This allows me to, I'm in a place that I wasn't in before I came to this event. So that was really an artistic moment for me.
Yeah.
And then I have followed him. In fact, actually, John Driscoll, who has been a composer for me since 1975 when the company was formed, he was the music director. He's done work with John Cage. He just exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art, the incredible rainforest exhibition that objects he created. And so I would say, not just John Cage, but the evolution of his ideas into, because dance today is not just dance. Dance is performance art. Dance is sculpture. Dance is, John Driscoll made music by projecting energy into his sculptures. But he was a sculptor turned musician. So we have now, dancers are multifaceted, and I think in a different way than just thinking multimedia. We're looking for a new word perhaps. But I forgot your question, Anton. The artists that are coming up. I think that one of the problems we have is recognizing when an art form is happening, like when breakdancing was happening, or when capoeira turned into breakdancing, or when hip hop was influencing us without necessarily being studied in the universities or so forth. So
and do you think that the dance audiences should be the special audience which should be prepared or kind of educated about what they're going to see? Because there's an opinion that dance is a special art form which is not so easy to understand, not so accessible. So we need a special audience. And talking about that, is that make dance a kind of difficult art form which is quite difficult to develop. Yeah.
Dance has a reputation in the textbooks of the first art because it was the human body, and it
Yes,
could
but
make
it's not like
sounds.
that,
And
actually.
okay, so I think the it's difficult. I think in some ways, in the urban situation, quite frequently, people tend to be more bombarded by culture, and dance is among the things that they're bombarded with. So they sort of have interaction with it by virtue of where they live. And I'd say we have been in a recent period of the arts where people wanted to be participants, not an observer. And I think that is really a great way when
That's a great
people
way, yeah.
feel, yeah, if they can dance, they can. Everyone loves to dance. Everyone I know loves to dance. They love to go to clubs. They love to, when they want to express something, they get a telephone call. They say, yes, and they dance. They make a physical expression, or they jump and run down my beautiful grandson, Milan Mercury. When he's excited, he jumps on the cushion and flies into the air and rolls across the floor. And I see him dancing. So it's like, I think if we think you have to learn something to be able to dance, it is alienating. And I think we have a lot to do with to educate people. And I think, however, the cat is out of the bag, or the cat's somehow, we're a borderless people now. We have the internet, and whatever dance has been secreted on the stage or secreted in the studio, it is no longer secreted. It is there. It's everywhere. And I think it's up to us as dancers to figure out how to be present in an accessible way on the internet. And I know it isn't to send people a dance by Maida Withers. Please click on open and watch this. That's for the select people that even know your name, or that know the word dance as an art form, so to speak. But I do think that it's up to us now to invent the realization of what dance can be on the platforms that are now where the public is.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
fortunately,
thank you.
we're forced to stay home, and we're forced to look at it. And I've been looking at lectures by science from Carnegie Institute and other things. I know people are scanning around looking for things. So we have to figure out how to use the new technologies to share work with others. That's what I think. And that's what my plan is for my new approach to making work, hopefully, is how does my work relate to that? Not just showing work that I've made in the past, but how do you relate to the options of live work and so forth? So we're in a new day, and I don't know who's going to take leadership with that. I'm not sure. I hope it's you.
And do you think, Maida, do you think dance is still experimental art? Because in 60s and 70s there were a lot of experiments. The people were finding different ways what dance can be and what it can't. So do you think now dancers and choreographers are still experimenting?
Okay, well, I have a recent work called Mind Fluctuations. Actually, this work was brought to me. Dance of Aurora, Fire in the Sky, I took to Tanya Fraga in Brazil. And Mind Fluctuations was brought to me by Tanya. And she said, I have this idea, Maida, and I'm wondering if you would be interested in collaborating to make a work. Mind Fluctuations, as the title, is her title. It's a perfect title, because what happens in this work is a dancer wears a helmet on the head like this. It has little feet that touch the skull in specific places. And there is then the energy coming from the expressive part of the brain is transferred to a dongle on stage or wherever you are. And by a wire, that goes to the computer. And there's a program by Tanya and her colleagues in Brazil that interfaces with the brain wave, the brain energy coming from the person wearing the helmet. And that manipulates the computer images created by Tanya for each of these 9 sections. So we're going to show you a little bit of mind fluctuations.
Yep.
So someone is wearing a helmet. I believe and what you're seeing in the back is actually manipulated and inspiring by the energy of the dancer's mind. Can you go back to another place and show another thing? Oh, like that. I'm going to move to another place. This is another image. This is a trio of Anthony Gongora and Alicia Diaz and Matthew. And you can see on this, Alicia's you can see the woman that's wearing you go to another one. These are computer artworks by Tanya. And in this instance, Matthew is wearing the helmet. Can you see the helmet on his head?
Yeah, I see it, yeah.
Yeah, and that helmet is actually stimulating the activity of Tanya's, these computer art. These are for Giselle Rosani on the sides wearing it now. And so there were 2 helmets. One, when one came off stage, the person took it off and someone helped them put it on and grease it up and so forth. So there were 9 sections to this work. Can you do one more? See if you can find me. No, it'll be back to we're looking, yeah. So here I am, I'm wearing the helmet. And this is a photograph of a gentleman in San Francisco, I believe, who made that helmet and showed up every day on the sidewalk to play his accordion. And I'm manipulating Tanya's images of energy coming out of her animation. And this is Anthony Gongora. This is his choreography, a brilliant dancer. So that is called The Monster Within. I love Anthony. He is so beautiful. And this is a photograph of cars in a parking garage. These are wheels and so forth from the parking garage. So all of these images were shot by Tanya. So she has, she can use them in her work. So the helmet is done by David Page. This is Evolis is a beautiful dancer. She did a beautiful work about her heritage in Mexico. So to answer your question about her father, anyway, here we are. So enough about that. But to answer your question, I can only speak for myself. And but experimenting can happen in many ways. Like you came here and we danced together. And we were in a gallery called, Gallery for Political Art by Charles Kraus. And it's here in Washington, D.C. And he was exhibiting art collected by himself and his father that was from Cuba and Russia and places where he was a correspondent for the Washington Post. And he had collected these art objects and they were all political. So we went into the gallery and we chose political art objects and we built a score of, I think there were 7 performance scores that we responded to. You responded in your way. Erica Revelar responded in her, and I responded in my way too. And then we invited the audience to come and they sat in the circle on the floor, and we speak while we're performing. We interact with the audience. We got them up off their seats to form a circle of unity, to a prayer for the future, and that violence and war and power can be condensed to freedom. Yeah. So anyway, Anton, you were a fantastic person because you're also an improviser and a very fine, intuitive improviser. So in that piece,
Thank you,
I
Maida.
had the idea, and then I just included you, and you were equal artists. We were all helping each other, and I'll never forget some things that you did in that work that made me laugh so hard out loud. And I never told you because I wanted to make sure you continued to refer to it if possible in your work. But so I would say artists' inclination, I think, if they're creative artists, is to experiment. And I don't think we don't like repeating ourselves so much, except
that's true.
Except for comfort.
And to summarize, the last question I want to ask you is, what do you think is the future of dance, and what way we can advocate dance to be supported from government or private institutions? How to make dance exist and be even more interesting and important as an art form?
I know that this is, for most artists, it is a form of crisis. The idea of how, artists, if dancers, will they be paid? How will they be paid? What studio will I use? How can I be in a studio? And who controls the venues, and where do they get their money, and what kind of art do they prefer, and how can you penetrate that? And there are so many questions that can feel overwhelming, that you think, well, I just can't possibly overcome the artistic burden and the financial burden and the political situation of the field and so forth. And those are very intense questions. And in the United States, we have, I'd say, 3 forms of support. One is the government, the National Endowment for the Art, and I think they have 155 million or something like that. On this, the Congress has allocated that. That's a small amount of money. That is not going to provide support for arts in 50 states. Can't cut it. But so there's the private sector, the nonprofit sector, which is a huge industry, because dance is lumped into the other arts. The other arts are lumped into all nonprofits for health, for education. Every nonprofit, culture is one aspect. So the amount of money, those nonprofits are huge. They have huge monies. The Rockefeller Foundation has a huge amount of money, but I think they're only required to devote 5% in a year to nonprofits. And that may be many things. That may be anti-war, that may be health, that may be the arts, that may be dance. And so I'd say that we have this ideal idea that the nonprofit sector is a great place. The government, in my opinion, is or should be the more responsible party. And there is a third way, and that is, that's your way. That's what I've observed. You have moved mountains in Ukraine without great government support, without a nonprofit sector that's underwriting Anton and your production company and so forth. But you have moved mountains through your invention and through your inclusiveness to include people like me on projects you're interested in. So I do think the stamina of support comes actually from the artists themselves. They find the people that have interest and perhaps can donate money. That's probably the general public. But I do think that government is it's like health. Everyone deserves to have good health and good treatment. Everyone deserves access to the arts. Why? Why? Because the arts are they are imagination. They are, you get to, as a participant in the arts, you get to create and engage in a way that is not necessarily the same as solving other daily problems. Or so for me, the art is essential. It's an essential part of life. It's not, oh, check that box or check this box. And a culture with a society without culture, or without cultural history, or without artists who live and breathe and work in the city that you live in. You change, Kiev, by your presence. I was with you when we worked together to create a beautiful work, 60 Moves.
Yeah,
For the
beautiful. I agree with you.
And those beautiful 17, 18, including you, beautiful dancers, they make a difference in Kiev. Their presence, the way they see life, the way they influence life, the way they are, you make a difference there for sure. You're a balance for the other things that seem important. But I know that you drive a very strong bus. And
Thank you.
I don't know if there's a strong government support there. If there's not, there should be. You have such a great history. Ukraine, great nation, a great history. And preserving that culture is important. However, people's lives change. And therefore, the way to create and express life is not going to be in the tradition necessarily, but it's something we don't know yet. We're watching to see what the new life is going to bring in terms of human expression, to share a vision. And so for me, it's essential government responsibility. And if you can't do that, then you take the money from your own bank account and you make it happen. I will say one thing to maybe as we conclude. I have not necessarily bought into the system of support from, I've had some good support from foundations. I've had some good support for government, but my projects are not necessarily definable to begin with. When I say, oh, I was going to stop dancing, so I went out to my place of birth, and I went there for 6 years, living with Belle Clough on the earth, meeting Indigenous people, taking dancers out there to dance with me, etc. I went there to stop dancing. But what happened? I created what I think is a magnificent work, which is called Utah, Spirit Place, Spirit Planet, Tukuna Kivats. I think it's my personal masterpiece, one of the few, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
how could I explain that to someone when I didn't even know the first year I went there, or the second year, or the third year? By the third year, I was documenting, I was doing different things. But sometimes as an artist, it's difficult to define how it influences the community. A lot of the grants ask you, well, how will this influence education? How will this influence health? How will this influence the prisons? How will this influence? And the arts are sometimes asked to solve so many ills. And actually, the arts are just the arts. And they are a segment of a society's vision for life. And it is an expression of the life, and especially for that community. So I would say it's an essential, but I think that it will exist without the certain kind of support. It can exist better. It can exist more fulfilled. It can exist at a more powerful level. There's one thing I wanted to say before we go, Anton. Can I say it here?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And this is sort of, this is a truth about Maida Withers projects. a large number of my projects are created with no anticipation of them ever being done again after they are premiered. I spent 6 years making the Utah project. There's many things that came from it, but the ultimate work, the Utah Spirit Place project, was performed once for 2,500 people out of doors in Lincoln Center on the 60-foot back, the outdoor theater there. And there were 6 musicians, Brett Michael Davids and his Butterfly group from Arizona. There was Bruce Hucko and 125 slides of his Earth slides, one of the great Earth photographers in America. And there were dancers. All of that happened. There is no way that that project could ever happen again without a lot of money. And I was satisfied with its presentation. I think all of the artists were satisfied with it. Certainly the audience was just bowled over by the tremendous moving images of the earth and the ancient rock art that is one of a kind in Utah. You saw it in that first film. One of the images of a petroglyph.
I saw it in the film, yeah.
Right. And so for me, my works often are seen once, twice, or 3 times, and probably never done again. Those large-scale works are balanced by my small works that involve usually smaller projects, improvisation, mostly dance and not collaborations. And so I would say the dance that I like mostly is dance that happens once or twice, or events that happen once or twice and you get to participate in it. And that is a profound experience. And I feel bad sometimes when there are things that I miss that I know I will never see again. So I think when companies that are repertory companies that need to perfect certain works that are danced generously, incredibly, again and again and again for different audiences, for children, for different situations, I deeply respect that. For the most part, my work doesn't fall into that category. And so it's hard to imagine it because you'll never see it unless you're looking at TV or something like that. But I think the idea that the dance is an elusive art form, because that movement happens and it never happens again that way, even if you repeat it. So one of the things that I like about dance is that it is like that. It's a disappearing act. And the remnants are there.
Yes, thank you very much, Maida. Thank you. I think we have to finish. And thank you for your energy and for your thoughts, for your wisdom, for the great work you did. And I hope you will do a lot of new works. I know that you never stop.
Well, I have a telephone conversation tomorrow with 2 brilliant people that I'm hoping it's of interest for a new work. But one thing I am working on, and that is how to use the platforms on the internet for making work and then performing that work also, either publicly or on the internet. But so I know that I hope you and I will work together again.
Yeah.
And this is another wonderful step. And good luck on your future interviews. And thank you for
Definitely, we will find the possibility, and we should find it. Thank you, Maida, and goodbye.
Okay, thank you, Anton. Give the dancers and everybody my love to Ukraine.
Bye-bye. Thank you.